concerns when it comes to tube feedings. Everyone here knows how to put the tube down into a patient. For those of you who haven't been checked off, we will have some time later on this morning for that. Okay. But let's say that we've got a patient who has an NG tube. I'm not obviously going to put this in. I mean, I love you guys dearly, but not that much. I'm not that dedicated. Okay. And the doctor orders for tube feed to be going through at, let's say, 20 milliliters an hour. Okay. Obviously, we're not going to sit there and just every hour go in and pour 20 milliliters every hour. So we get to use the pump, which is nice. Now, the only bad thing about the pump is it's a machine. Machines don't think, okay? And so it can cause problems. When you have a patient who is on a tube feeding at a continuous rate, you are not allowed to lay them flat because this tube is bypassing a couple of the safety features that our body has to maintain the gastric juices in the stomach. Okay, and with this being through one of them, which the one is right about here, your cardiac sphincter, the top of the stomach, okay, if the body all of a sudden just stops processing the tube feed and it just builds up and builds up and builds up, then the stomach becomes like a balloon. And it's gotta go somewhere. And if it's not going this way, it's gonna go this way, okay? So, and if they're laying flat, what's the problem with that?
Aspiration.
It's gonna go right into their lungs. You got it, okay? So make sure that their head of bed is no less than 30 degrees at all times. If you have to lay them flat to like move them up, okay, perfectly fine to do that. Usually there is a hold or a pause button on these. You just need to make sure that you've paused it or turned it to off, whatever your facility does, while you're repositioning them, and then get them back into a safe position and then turn it back on, okay? Some of them, the ones I'm more familiar with are really nice in that it has a bag for the tube feeds and then it has another bag for water flushes. So, because we want to keep our patients hydrated, and if we can use the stomach, all the better. Because what happens if you don't use it? You lose it, okay? And so you can program it to where it'll give, 30, 40, or however many milliliter flush every 4 or 6 hours, depending on the severity of it. So, because it is medical equipment, you have to be checked off at the facility. So we just go over the process here, okay? It's a little bit different. It is fairly similar to setting up an IV pump. It's a little bit different, obviously, because you don't put tube feeds through an IV. Okay, can we feed somebody through an IV?
Yes.
Yes, and what's it called?
Parenteral nutrition.
TPN, total parietal nutrition. Okay, we're bypassing the stomach, everything. This, just like an IV, has this little thing called a drip chamber. Okay, we don't want to fill this up all the way because inside here, where it sits, is a little sensor to tell if there's movement. If it doesn't sense any dropping or drips or anything in there, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to beep and beep and beep. So if you fill this up too far up, it's not going to be able to sense those drops happening, and it'll continuously beep and drive you nuts. And your patient too. Okay. This, unlike an IV, has a nice little stretchy bit just after the drip chamber, and the way that this is made is for it to go around this lovely little black knob here that will move the tube feeding through here and advance it into the person's stomach. Okay? So, anytime you are accessing a patient's G-tube or nasogastric tube, okay, if they're getting tube feeds, obviously pause it, and you need to aspirate with your syringe here, okay? Because we want to make sure that what we're putting in is getting processed through the rest of the GI tract. Because if they're not absorbing it, okay, it's just gonna, again, go back to that balloon thing with the stomach blowing up and up and up and up and up. All right. So whatever you pull out, as far as aspirate at this point, if you get more than your syringe, you need to empty it into here and just keep pulling until you don't pull anymore. You need to calculate that and see how much you get. If you get more than 2 hours worth of tube feed, so if it's going at 40 an hour and you pull back 120, that's an issue. They're not absorbing it, okay? What do you do with this though? You put it back. You put it back in, okay? Because remember, what's one of the things that can cause hypokalemia that we talked about yesterday?
Malabsorption.
Malabsorption is one, but we're causing one of them. Suction. We're removing fluids from their stomach. It's still got gastric juices and stuff in there. So that's why we put it back, okay? I wouldn't start this back up again if I had, 3 hours worth of tube feed in my patient's stomach, okay? I would hold it, I would turn it off and let the doctor know, hey, we might need to get a nutrition consult or something because they're not absorbing the tube feeds, okay? Whenever you're accessing this as well, what do you need to do before and after? Huh?
Flush it.
Flush it, yes. With at least, how much?
30.
At least 30 before and after, okay? One, you want to flush it before you give any medication or anything through it, because if you don't, and you go to push this in, and it's not flowing, if it's not patent, guess what? You're going to get covered in medication, and that's not fun, okay? So just take a little bit of water first, just the 30, put it in there, flush it, see how well it is patent or if it is not, okay? And then you can give your medication, and then you want to flush with another 30 to make sure that there's no medication just sitting in here. We used to do, even with IV therapy, we used to do a thing called SASH. Have you guys ever heard of that? SASH, so it was saline additive, or the medication, and then saline, and then we used to actually put heparin in the IVs to keep them patent. But then we weren't, pulling the heparin out, so then we were heparinizing our patients a little bit too much. So now we don't do the heparin anymore unless we're packing a large, central line. Then we do that. But for regular peripheral IVs, it's just saline, additive, saline. So think of it as, solution, additive, solution across the board, okay? All right. Now, sometimes you might have to do what are called bolus feedings, okay? Where they might have to have, 2 cans for breakfast, 2 cans for lunch, 2 cans for dinner, and a can before bed, okay, to simulate a regular diet intake. So you'll still need your piston syringe, and there's a couple schools of thought. Some people will say that you can fill up the syringe and then take your plunger and just plunge it on in, okay? Gotta be careful with that because you can perforate somebody's stomach. Some people will do it that way, and that's perfectly fine, especially when it comes to medications, okay? But I will say, when you're giving bolus feeds through a can like this, what temperature do you think this needs to be?
Room temp.
Room temperature. If it's too cold, you can actually cause the stomach to kind of go into a shock because it's not used to that. That's why we have the esophagus as long as it does. Even if we drink cold water, it's warming up the water as it goes down before it gets to the stomach, okay? So what's recommended is you don't want to go further than 2/3 of the way up with the tube feeds and just let it kind of, go down on its own, okay? Obviously this needs to be higher than the stomach, physics, okay? And then you have to give however many your patient can tolerate or however many is ordered. You do need to record this as intake though, okay? And then you would want to flush as well, because this stuff, it's high in sugar. Because remember who makes it? Nestle. So the same company that makes Nesquik, chocolate milk, okay? And all those yummy treats covered in chocolate, they make the same stuff. They make different formulations for different diets. So, but either way, sometimes it's milk-based too, depending, okay? And that can curdle or get clogged up in here. We used to be able to put soda down these kinds of things the carbonation would break it up, but we're not allowed to do that anymore. In a pinch. All right. Any questions about either of those? Now notice those 2 things were both on your checkoff sheets, but you're not getting checked off on them. Okay, you are only getting checked off of insertion and removal. Okay? So, any questions? You're just itching. Okay. I'll check it out. All right. Now for the fun part. Who wants to be my patient? All right, Miss Savannah, come on down. They're like, we know him better than this. We want to know what he's doing first. This is the fun part. This is audience participation. Now, nope, you won't use your computer.
I'm glad I didn't say anything.
Right,
Oh,
for
yeah.
once. She's like, I'm not saying nothing. All right, so when it comes to tube feedings and things like that, we still have to monitor our patient's blood glucose, okay? And make sure. Now, typically, if they're on a tube feeding, all of a sudden her eye just went, what? Okay, that's fine. I won't make you. That's okay.
I don't mind. I've done that before.
Come on, Kevin. I'll pick on you
I'm
this
right
time.
here.
Actually, yeah, I'll go with Shauna because she's right here up front. Make it a little easier on myself.
Do this all the time for gestational diabetes.
Yup.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're done?
No,
Gestational.
I check it too sometimes. I haven't like recently though. I'm like weird.
For those of you in the back, come on up so you guys can see.